Olivia Harper, 32, never expected her father's death would reveal the ultimate betrayal. When Dad's hidden will was discovered, it exposed how my sister Charlotte had been systematically stealing from our family for years, including listing me as a vendor at her lavish wedding rather than a bridesmaid. The final inheritance distribution shocked everyone, especially Charlotte, who had been counting on her special relationship with Dad to secure her future. But karma was about to serve the coldest dish of all. Before I dive into this family revenge drama that turned my world upside down, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more shocking family stories. Trust me, what happens next in this tale of betrayal and justice will make you question everything you thought you knew about blood loyalty. I grew up in a seemingly picture-perfect family in suburban Connecticut. Our father, Richard Harper, was a successful investment banker who provided us with everything we could ever want: private school education, summer vacations in Europe, and a beautiful colonial home with a swimming pool. My mother, Elizabeth, was the quintessential homemaker who volunteered at local charities and hosted the neighborhood's most envied dinner parties. Then there was my older sister Charlotte, 3 years my senior, who had always been the golden child, valedictorian prom queen, and Dad's undeniable favorite. From the outside, we appeared to be the embodiment of the American dream, a family without flaws or fractures. Charlotte and I shared a bathroom growing up, whispered secrets after bedtime, and defended each other against schoolyard bullies. I idolized her effortless confidence and impeccable style, while she claimed to admire my creativity and kind heart. We were different but complementary, or so I believed. The dynamic began shifting subtly during our college years. Charlotte attended an Ivy League school on the East Coast, studying finance to follow in Dad's footsteps, while I pursued photography at a less prestigious art school in California. During holiday gatherings, Dad would proudly showcase Charlotte's academic achievements and internship offers, while my creative endeavors were relegated to polite nods and quick subject changes. "Olivia is still finding her way," he'd say, with a dismissive wave of his hand, as though my passion was merely a phase to outgrow. Despite this obvious favoritism, Charlotte and I maintained what I thought was a close relationship. We called weekly, visited each other's cities when possible, and continued our tradition of annual sister spa weekends. When I struggled financially after graduation, bouncing between freelance gigs and service industry jobs, Charlotte would sometimes slip me cash or pay for dinner, always with a smile that I mistook for genuine sisterly support. "What's the point of making all this money if I can't help my baby sister?" she'd say, her designer handbag casually displayed on the table between us. What I couldn't see then was how these gestures weren't acts of generosity but subtle reminders of her superiority. Each check she picked up reinforced our positions in the family hierarchy: Charlotte as the successful, responsible daughter, and me as the struggling artist who couldn't quite get her act together. In retrospect, the warning signs were there. The way she'd casually mention her promotions during my career setbacks. How she'd give me her designer hand-me-downs with tags still attached, making sure I knew exactly how much they cost. The backhanded compliments about my unique style or bohemian apartment. But family loyalty blinded me to these microaggressions, and I continued to believe in our unbreakable bond. Everything changed when Charlotte met Edward Wellington III, heir to a hotel empire, and her perfect match in both ambition and social climbing. Their whirlwind romance moved quickly from dating to engagement in just 6 months. The wedding planning began immediately, and with it, the first major cracks in our relationship became impossible to ignore. What I didn't realize then was that those cracks weren't new. They had always been there, carefully plastered over with fake smiles and conditional affection. Charlotte had been playing a long game, cultivating her position as the favored child, while systematically undermining mine. And her wedding would become the stage where her true colors would finally be impossible to ignore. Charlotte's engagement to Edward transformed her from merely ambitious to absolutely obsessive. Her dream wedding rapidly evolved into what she called the social event of the season, a 3-day extravaganza at the Wellington family's Hamptons estate, with a guest list of 350 elite names. From the beginning, I assumed I'd be her maid of honor. After all, we'd pinky sworn this to each other at ages 8 and 11 while playing dress-up in our mother's closet. When she asked me to meet for brunch at an exclusive Manhattan restaurant, I expected the official invitation to stand beside her. I'd even prepared a heartfelt speech expressing my gratitude. Instead, Charlotte stirred her mimosa slowly and said, "Liv, I've been thinking about how to incorporate your talents into the wedding." "My talents," I repeated, confused. "Yes, Edward's cousin is handling the wedding planning, but she's overwhelmed. Since you have that artsy eye, I thought you could help with the photography." My stomach dropped. "You want me to photograph your wedding, instead of being in your bridal party?" Charlotte laughed, a tight, controlled sound. "Don't be dramatic, you'll still be in family photos." "But Melissa, Victoria, and Gwendolyn have been my friends since prep school, and Edward's sister completes the bridal party perfectly. It's about balance." These were friends. She rarely mentioned women who'd apparently now taken precedence over her only sister. But what came next was even worse. Besides, she continued sliding a folder across the table. "This is a fantastic opportunity for your portfolio." The exposure alone, I flipped open the folder to find not a heartfelt request but a formal vendor contract outlining my photography services at a rate well below my professional fee. "You're hiring me as a vendor," my voice cracked as the reality sank in. "I'm giving you an opportunity," she corrected, signaling for the check. Most photographers would kill to have their work associated with the Wellington name. The final blow came when I discovered that Dad had offered to pay Charlotte's wedding planner double her fee to find another photographer, saying it was inappropriate for family to work the event. Charlotte had insisted, claiming she was helping my struggling sister. The wedding planner let this slip during a planning meeting. I was required to attend, not realizing the humiliation it caused me. On the wedding day, I was directed to use the service entrance. My name badge read vendor, while our distant cousin from Minnesota somehow made the cut for family photos. During the reception, I wasn't assigned a seat at any table expected, instead to circulate and capture candid moments while everyone else enjoyed the 5-course meal. My parents noticed but said nothing, unwilling to cause a scene at Charlotte's special day. The final indignity came during the father-daughter dance. As I positioned myself for the perfect shot, I overheard Dad whisper to Charlotte, "You've always made me so proud. No one deserves this perfect day more than you." Their matching tearful smiles were genuine, intimate, a bond I had never experienced with him despite years of seeking his approval. That night, after uploading all the raw files as contracted, I sobbed in my hotel room. Not just because of the humiliation, but because I finally recognized the pattern that had defined our relationship for years. Every favor Charlotte had done for me had come with strings attached. Every time she'd included me in her life, it had been on her terms in ways that reinforced her superiority. The sister I thought I had, my childhood defender, my confidant, my friend, didn't exist. Perhaps she never had. I returned home determined to create distance to protect what little remained of my self-respect. When Charlotte called 2 weeks later, demanding to know why her wedding photos weren't edited yet, I reminded her that basic editing wasn't included in the contract she'd written. She'd need to pay my standard rate for that service. "After everything our family has done for you," she hissed, "this is how you repay us." That was the last conversation we had before Dad's unexpected heart attack 3 months later. It would change everything. Dad's heart attack came without warning on a crisp October morning. One minute he was jogging his usual 5-mile route around the neighborhood. The next he was collapsed on Mrs. Peterson's meticulously maintained front lawn. By the time the ambulance arrived, Richard Harper was gone at just 62 years old. The news reached me via Mom's broken voice on the phone while I was in the middle of a photo shoot for a local magazine. "Olivia, he's gone," was all she could manage before dissolving into sobs. I abandoned my equipment, apologized profusely to the confused client, and booked the first flight home to Connecticut. Charlotte arrived at our family home from New York in a black Escalade with Edward in tow, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes, her grief as perfectly coordinated as her outfit. She took immediate control, consulting with Mom about funeral arrangements, while simultaneously working her phone to ensure Dad's high-profile colleagues and friends would attend the service. I was relegated to answering the door and accepting casseroles from neighbors, the background role I had always played in the family drama. "The flowers should be white lilies, nothing else," Charlotte instructed the florist over the phone. "And make sure the obituary emphasizes his philanthropic work and board positions. This will be covered by the financial press." When I suggested incorporating Dad's favorite blue hydrangeas into the arrangements, the flowers he'd tenderly grown in our garden each summer, Charlotte dismissed the idea with a wave of her manicured hand. "This isn't about sentimentality, Olivia. It's about honoring his legacy appropriately." The funeral was exactly as Charlotte planned. Elegant, formal, and impeccably executed. The church overflowed with financial elites and society figures, many of whom I'd never met. Charlotte delivered a polished eulogy highlighting Dad's professional achievements and charitable contributions. I wasn't asked to speak. When I approached Mom about sharing a few personal memories, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Let's not complicate things, dear. Charlotte has everything under control." The reception afterward was held at the country club where Dad had spent his Saturdays golfing. As waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, I overheard Charlotte speaking to Dad's old business partner. "Daddy always said I was the only one who truly understood his world," she said, dabbing carefully at her eyes. "We were planning for me to join the family investment firm after I finished my MBA. Now I'll have to carry on his legacy without him." This was news to me. Dad had never mentioned any plans for Charlotte to join his firm, at least not in my presence. But it reinforced what I'd always known. Their connection transcended the relationship I had with him. Even in death, I remained an outsider. 3 days after the funeral, Mr. Goldstein, Dad's attorney for over 30 years, requested the family gather at his office for the reading of the will. Charlotte arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a conservative black suit that screamed old money. Mom looked fragile but composed in her grief. I felt underdressed in the only black dress I owned, purchased hastily from a department store the day before the funeral. Mr. Goldstein's office was all dark wood and leather-bound books, exactly what you'd expect from a lawyer who catered to the wealthy. He greeted us solemnly, offered his condolences again, and then pulled out a thick folder, embossed with the law firm's gold insignia. "Before we begin," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I want to clarify that Richard came to see me 6 months ago to make some significant changes to his will. These amendments were executed properly and are legally binding." Charlotte straightened in her chair. "What kind of changes?" Mr. Goldstein's expression remained neutral. "All will become clear as we proceed with the reading." As he began to read the standard legal preamble, I noticed Charlotte's confident expression. She caught my eye and gave me a small, almost sympathetic smile. The look of someone who knows they're about to receive exactly what they deserve, while pitying those who will get less. Little did she know that Dad's final act would shatter the family dynamic she'd so carefully manipulated for decades. The bombshell was about to drop, and none of us were prepared for the fallout. Now, regarding the distribution of assets, Mr. Goldstein continued adjusting his reading glasses. To my beloved wife, Elizabeth Harper, I leave our family home in Greenwich, Connecticut, free and clear of any mortgage, along with a trust fund of $5 million to ensure her comfort for the remainder of her life. Mom nodded slightly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. This was expected and reasonable. To my daughter, Charlotte Harper, Wellington, Mr. Goldstein paused, glancing briefly at my sister. I leave the sum of $50,000. The room went silent. Charlotte's face froze, her perfectly plucked eyebrows inching toward her hairline. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake, she said, her voice controlled but tight. Dad's estate is worth millions. There is no mistake, Mrs. Wellington, Mr. Goldstein replied calmly. Please allow me to continue. Charlotte's face flushed red as Mr. Goldstein turned the page. To my daughter Olivia Harper, I leave the remainder of my estate, including but not limited to my investment portfolio, valued at approximately $12 million, my ownership stake in Harper Financial Advisors, all properties excluding the family home, my art collection and personal effects. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be right. Dad had always favored Charlotte. Always. This is absurd, Charlotte snapped, standing abruptly. Daddy would never do this. She must have manipulated him somehow. Olivia doesn't know the first thing about finance or running a company. Mr. Goldstein remained unruffled. There's more, Mrs. Wellington. Your father instructed me to provide a sealed letter explaining his decisions, along with some documentation he felt was relevant. He retrieved a thick manila envelope from his desk drawer and broke the wax seal. From it, he removed a handwritten letter and a USB drive. Richard asked that I read this letter aloud in the presence of all parties, he explained, unfolding the pages. My dear family, if you're hearing this, then I've passed on perhaps sooner than any of us expected. Life is unpredictable that way. What I'm about to reveal may come as a shock, but it's necessary for the truth to finally come to light. For years I've maintained careful records of my finances. 6 months ago, while reviewing these records, I discovered numerous discrepancies. After hiring a forensic accountant, I learned that Charlotte had been systematically embezzling funds from both the family accounts and my business since she gained access to them after college. The evidence is irrefutable. Charlotte has stolen approximately $750,000 over the past decade through falsified expense reports, unauthorized transfers, and manipulated financial documents. Her expertise in finance made her theft sophisticated but ultimately detectable. Charlotte's face drained of color. This is a lie. I would never. Mr. Goldstein held up his hand. Please, Mrs. Wellington, allow me to finish. What broke my heart even more than the theft was discovering how Charlotte had been treating Olivia. Through her apparent generosity, Charlotte was actually giving Olivia small portions of money she had stolen from me, positioning herself as the successful, caring sister, while simultaneously undermining Olivia's confidence and independence. The final straw was learning how Charlotte manipulated the arrangements for her wedding. The vendor contract for Olivia wasn't her wedding planner's idea, it was Charlotte's. She specifically instructed her planner to treat Olivia as hired help, not family, while telling me the opposite. I've spent my life favoring one daughter over the other, believing Charlotte's success reflected my values while Olivia's creative spirit was somehow less worthy. I was terribly, unforgivably wrong. Charlotte's success has been built partially on theft and deception, while Olivia has struggled honestly to make her own way without compromise. The USB drive contains all the evidence of Charlotte's financial manipulations, along with copies of emails between her and her wedding planner explicitly discussing how to humiliate Olivia at the wedding. I've chosen not to pursue legal charges, but this information should make clear why I've made these decisions with my estate. Charlotte, I hope you find a way to become the person I wrongly believed you were. Olivia, I'm deeply sorry for failing to see your true worth. I know you'll handle this inheritance with integrity that your sister never showed. With love and regret, Richard Harper. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Charlotte stood rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped the back of her chair. I felt numb emotions cycling too rapidly to process. Vindication, grief, shock, and a profound sadness for the relationship with my father that could never be repaired. "This is slander," Charlotte finally hissed. "I'll contest this will. No judge will uphold such a ridiculous distribution based on unfounded accusations." Mr. Goldstein calmly plugged the USB drive into his computer. "Before you pursue that course, Mrs. Wellington, I should inform you that your father instructed me to turn over this evidence to the authorities if the will is contested. While he chose not to press charges during his lifetime, the statute of limitations has not expired on many of these financial crimes." Charlotte's face contorted with rage and fear. Edward, who had remained silent throughout the reading, finally spoke. "Charlotte, is any of this true?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer him, instead turning to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "You did this. Somehow you poisoned him against me." I shook my head slowly. "I had no idea, Charlotte. None. I know this revelation is shocking, I'm still processing it myself. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever discovered a betrayal from someone you completely trusted? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments, and if you're finding this family drama as intense as I lived it, please hit that like button and subscribe for the next part, where you'll discover how my sister tried to destroy the evidence, and what happened when the rest of our family and friends learned the truth. The aftermath of the will reading was nuclear. Charlotte stormed out of Mr. Goldstein's office, slamming the heavy oak door with such force that the framed law degrees on the wall rattled precariously. Edward followed his face, a mask of confusion and embarrassment. Mom sat frozen in her chair, aged years in minutes, while I remained rooted to the spot, unable to process the seismic shift in my reality. "Take some time to digest this information, Mr. Goldstein advised, gently handing me a thick folder of documents. "Everything you need is in here: account numbers, property, deeds, company information. I'm available whenever you're ready to discuss next steps." I nodded mutely, clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. Mom and I drove home in silence, the weight of Dad's revelations pressing down on us like a physical force. When we arrived at the family home, Charlotte's Escalade was already in the driveway. "I don't think I can face her right now," Mom whispered, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. "You don't have to," I assured her. "Let me handle this." Inside, Charlotte was tearing through Dad's home office drawers, pulled open papers scattered across the floor. Edward stood awkwardly in the doorway, his usual confident demeanor replaced by uncomfortable uncertainty. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Charlotte didn't even look up, finding proof that Dad wasn't in his right mind when he changed his will. "There must be medication records, therapy notes, something we can use to invalidate it." "Charlotte, stop." My voice was firmer than I'd ever used with her. "You know he wasn't impaired. You're just desperate because you got caught." She whirled around, her perfect composure completely shattered. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I worked my entire life to make him proud. I did everything right while you were off playing with cameras and wasting your potential. Everything I took, I deserved." Her admission hung in the air between us. Edward's sharp intake of breath confirmed he'd heard it too. "So it's true?" he asked, his voice hollow. "You actually stole from your father?" Charlotte's face morphed from rage to calculated charm so quickly it was disturbing. "Eddie baby, you don't understand how family businesses work. It wasn't stealing, it was taking advances on what would eventually be mine anyway." "And what about the wedding?" I asked quietly. "Was humiliating me part of your entitlement too?" Her mask slipped again, revealing the contempt beneath. "You should have been grateful for the opportunity. Your little hobby isn't a real career. I was doing you a favor, giving you exposure to people who could actually help you." Edward looked between us, visibly uncomfortable with this new version of his wife. Charlotte, I think we should leave. We need to talk privately. I'm not going anywhere until this is resolved, she snapped, but he had already taken her arm firmly and was guiding her toward the door. As they left, Charlotte turned back, her eyes narrowed. This isn't over, Olivia. Dad might have had his little revenge from beyond the grave, but you won't know what to do with any of it. You'll come crawling back, begging for help, and we'll see who has the upper hand then. I should have recognized the threat for what it was. Charlotte never made empty promises. But in my emotional exhaustion, I dismissed it as the desperate lashing out of someone caught in their own web of lies. The first attack came 3 days later. I woke to frantic calls from the office manager at Dad's company. Apparently, Charlotte had arrived at Harper Financial Advisors at 7 a.m., announcing to the stunned employees that there had been a misunderstanding about the succession plan. She'd claimed temporary control was necessary to protect the company from inexperienced management, meaning me. By the time I arrived, she had already accessed Dad's computer, downloaded files, and attempted to transfer client accounts to a new firm she was establishing. Thankfully, Mr. Goldstein had anticipated such a move and had already frozen the company accounts pending the formal transfer of ownership. Charlotte was escorted from the building by security screaming about family betrayal while stunned employees watched. The damage to her professional reputation was immediate, but that didn't stop her campaign against me. Next came the smear campaign. Charlotte contacted every member of our extended family, every family friend, and every business associate of Dad's, with a carefully crafted narrative. I had manipulated our elderly father during a vulnerable period after his heart medication was changed, turning him against his loyal daughter and stealing what was rightfully hers. Some believed her, particularly those who had always seen me as the less impressive Harper daughter. Others were skeptical, especially those who had witnessed Charlotte's ruthless ambition over the years. The family was effectively split into factions, with holiday gatherings and traditional reunions now impossible to navigate. The worst blow came when Charlotte somehow accessed my professional email account and sent messages to all my clients, announcing that I was abandoning photography to run my father's business and suggesting alternative photographers they should hire instead, all friends of hers who would ensure I never worked in the industry again. By the time I discovered the breach, I had lost 3 major contracts, and my professional reputation was in tatters. It took weeks of damage control, legal threats, and humble explanations to salvage what remained of my photography career. Then came the legal onslaught. Though Charlotte couldn't contest the will without risking criminal charges, she found other avenues of attack. She filed claims against specific assets, arguing they had been promised to her verbally. She disputed the valuation of the company, claiming Dad had artificially inflated its worth to make her portion seem smaller. She even attempted to claim that some of the embezzled funds were actually gifts that Dad had forgotten documenting. Each legal challenge required my response, draining the inheritance through legal fees, just as Charlotte had intended. Mr. Goldstein assured me her claims had no merit, but the emotional and financial toll was exactly what she wanted, to make my victory feel Pyrrhic. The final blow was the most personal. Charlotte contacted my long-term boyfriend Marcus, with whom I'd been having relationship difficulties since before Dad's death. She invited him to lunch under the guise of family concern and proceeded to paint me as unstable, money-hungry, and vindictive. She suggested that my recent inheritance would change me fundamentally, that I would no longer need or appreciate him. Olivia has always been jealous of what others have, she told him, her voice dripping with false concern. Now that she has money, she'll trade up for someone more aligned with her new status. I just thought you deserved a warning before she hurts you. Marcus, to his credit, told me about the meeting immediately. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and within weeks our 5-year relationship had crumbled under the weight of unspoken suspicions. and Charlotte's persistent interference. As I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by legal documents and unanswered client emails, I realized Charlotte had succeeded in making my inheritance feel like a curse rather than a blessing. She had poisoned relationships, damaged my career, and isolated me from support systems, all because she couldn't stand that her carefully constructed facade had finally crumbled. But what Charlotte had forgotten was that I had spent a lifetime in her shadow, watching and learning. I knew her playbook, and for the first time I had the resources to fight back. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing Charlotte's own game against her. For 2 weeks, I allowed myself to feel every emotion Charlotte's attacks had stirred in me. The hurt, the betrayal, the fear, and yes, the rage. I mourned not just for my father but for the sister I thought I had, the family that once was, and the peaceful resolution that would never come. Then one morning I woke up with absolute clarity. Charlotte had spent her life underestimating me. It was time to use that to my advantage. My first step was securing what I already had. I hired a cybersecurity expert to protect all my accounts, emails, and digital assets. I changed every password, implemented two-factor authentication, and set up alerts for any suspicious activity. Next, I gathered a team of professionals I could trust: a new attorney specializing in family financial disputes, a forensic accountant independent from Dad's firm, and a reputation management consultant. "We need to approach this methodically," I explained during our first meeting. "Charlotte thinks I'm floundering, overwhelmed by responsibilities I don't understand. Let's let her keep thinking that while we quietly build our case." My attorney Diane Winters nodded approvingly. "The best defense is a well-planned offense." "What do you have in mind?" "I want to understand exactly what Charlotte did, not just the financial theft, but the emotional manipulation. I need a complete picture." The forensic accountant, Mr. Reeves, spent weeks digging through Dad's financial records, going back further than the initial investigation. What he uncovered was staggering. Charlotte's embezzlement hadn't started after college as Dad believed. It had begun during her first summer internship at his company, when she was just 19. The total amount stolen over 13 years was closer to $1.2 million, not the $750,000 Dad had discovered. "She was clever, Mr. Reeves explained, showing me the complex trail of transactions. She skimmed small amounts from multiple accounts, manipulated expense reports, and created ghost vendors who received regular payments. But once you know what to look for, the pattern is unmistakable." Meanwhile, I began reaching out to people from our past: former nannies, housekeepers, Charlotte's ex-boyfriends, old family friends who had drifted away mysteriously. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle that was my sister's true character. Our childhood nanny, Mrs. Patel, whom I hadn't seen in 15 years, invited me for tea at her modest apartment. "I always worried about you, Olivia," she confessed, pouring chai into delicate cups. "Charlotte was different even as a child. When she was 7, I caught her cutting up your favorite teddy bear. When I asked why, she said now Daddy will have to buy her a new one and notice her. I told your parents, but they said it was normal sibling rivalry." Charlotte's college roommate revealed that my sister had deliberately sabotaged other top students by stealing notes before exams or spreading rumors about cheating to professors. Her first boss after graduation admitted Charlotte had taken credit for a major project he had primarily developed, which launched her career while stalling his. The most disturbing revelation came from Edward's sister Vanessa, who had been part of Charlotte's bridal party. Over a tense lunch, she confided, "Charlotte made me promise not to tell anyone, but the night before your dad changed his will, she came to our house in hysterics. She said your father had discovered some financial irregularities and was threatening to cut her off. Edward calmed her down and suggested they meet with your dad to explain, but Charlotte insisted she could handle him alone." Vanessa hesitated. 2 weeks later, she told Edward everything was fine, that your dad had seen reason. I checked the dates against Mr. Goldstein's records. The day after Charlotte's meltdown was exactly when Dad had come to change his will. Whatever confrontation had occurred between them had been the final straw. As evidence mounted, I maintained a deliberate public profile of confusion and distress. I took temporary leave from Dad's company, citing the need for time to grieve and learn. I let carefully selected rumors circulate that I was considering selling the business because it was too much to handle. When Charlotte's lawyer sent aggressive settlement offers, I had my attorney respond with tentative interest, requesting more time to consider. All the while, I was methodically documenting every attack, every lie, and every manipulation Charlotte had orchestrated throughout our lives. I created a secure website accessible only with a password, uploading financial records, witness statements, emails, and audio recordings of conversations with people from our past. The picture it painted of Charlotte was damning and irrefutable. The tipping point came when I discovered Charlotte had approached Dad's former assistant, attempting to bribe her to sign an affidavit, claiming Dad had been confused and easily manipulated in his final months. The assistant, loyal to Dad even after his death, recorded the conversation and brought it straight to me. She offered me $25,000 to lie, she explained, outraged. As if I would ever betray Richard's memory that way. With this final piece of evidence, my plan was ready. I invited Mr. Goldstein to review the comprehensive dossier I had compiled. "This goes far beyond what your father discovered," he said gravely after hours of examination. "Charlotte's actions constitute serious financial crimes, witness tampering, defamation, and fraud. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on most of these offenses." "I don't want my sister in prison," I clarified. "I want her to stop attacking me and face what she's done. I want the truth to be known." Mr. Goldstein nodded thoughtfully. "Then I suggest a strategic approach. One that gives her a choice between public accountability and legal consequences." The following day, I sent a simple email to Charlotte, Edward, my mother, and Charlotte's attorney. The subject line read, "Family Meeting. Final Resolution." The body contained only a date, time, location, and a link to a password-protected website with the instruction, "Review," before attending. Password is Charlotte's baby name from when we played house as children. It was a password only Charlotte and I would know. Evangeline, the name she had given her imaginary daughter in our childhood games. By using it, I was sending her a clear message. I remembered everything, including who she had once been before. Ambition and jealousy consumed her. Within minutes of sending the email, my phone rang. It was Charlotte, her voice uncharacteristically small. "How much do you know?" she asked, without preamble. "Everything," I replied simply. "Every lie, every theft, every manipulation since we were children. I know what you did to Dad, to me, to everyone who trusted you." There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice hollow. "What do you want?" "I want you to come to the meeting and face the consequences of your actions. One way or another, this ends now." As I hung up, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what could have been. But mixed with that sadness was something new. A quiet, unshakable confidence in my own strength. Charlotte had underestimated me for the last time. The day of the meeting arrived with a strange sense of calm. I had chosen Dad's favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where he had celebrated every major milestone. The private dining room in the back had witnessed birthdays, anniversaries, and business deals. Now it would host the final act of our family drama. I arrived early to set up my laptop and projector, arranging the chairs so everyone would have a clear view of the screen. Mom arrived next, her face lined with worry but her eyes clear. She had reviewed all the evidence I had gathered, and after the initial shock and denial had worn off, had finally accepted the truth about her elder daughter. "Are you sure about this, Olivia?" she asked, squeezing my hand. "There's no going back once this happens." "I'm sure," I replied. It's the only way to end this for good. Mr. Goldstein arrived precisely on time, accompanied by Mr. Reeves, the forensic accountant. They set up their materials quietly at one end of the table. At precisely 2 p.m. the door opened again, and Charlotte entered with Edward and her attorney, a shark-like woman in an impeccable suit. Charlotte had clearly dressed for battle in a designer navy suit that projected power and control. But her usual confidence was missing. Her eyes darted nervously to the laptop and she couldn't quite meet my gaze. Edward looked grim, his jaw set in a hard line. I noticed they weren't touching, maintaining a careful distance from each other. "Thank you all for coming," I began once everyone was seated. "I've called this meeting to resolve the ongoing conflict in our family once and for all." Charlotte's attorney immediately jumped in. "My client is open to discussing a reasonable settlement regarding the disputed assets, but we reject any characterization of wrongdoing on her part." "This isn't a negotiation," I said calmly. "This is Charlotte's opportunity to take responsibility for her actions before they become public knowledge." I turned to my laptop and opened a PowerPoint presentation. The first slide simply read, "The truth about Charlotte Harper Wellington." For the past 3 months, I've been documenting every aspect of Charlotte's financial crimes and personal betrayals. I've interviewed over 30 people from our past and present. I've had experts analyze every financial record dating back to her first internship at Dad's company. What I've discovered goes far beyond what Dad knew when he changed his will. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a comprehensive timeline of Charlotte's embezzlement with exact dollar amounts, dates, and methods. $1.2 million, over 13 years, I stated. Beginning when Charlotte was still in college, and continuing until Dad caught her 6 months ago. Charlotte's attorney started to object, but Edward silenced her with a sharp gesture, his eyes fixed on the screen. I continued methodically through the presentation, displaying evidence of Charlotte's systematic manipulation, the emails to my clients, the attempted bribery of Dad's assistant, the fabricated stories she had spread through our social circle. With each new revelation, Charlotte seemed to physically shrink in her chair. When I played the recording of her offering money for a false affidavit, Edward put his head in his hands. "This is just a sample," I explained. "The complete dossier includes statements from your former roommates, colleagues, and friends, detailing patterns of sabotage, theft, and manipulation dating back to childhood. It includes financial records that would interest the SEC, the IRS, and potentially the district attorney." I turned to face Charlotte directly. "I've prepared 3 copies of this evidence. One is already in a secure location, with instructions to release it publicly if anything happens to me or if the attacks against me continue. The second is here." I placed a USB drive on the table. "The third has been reviewed by Mr. Goldstein and will be held in confidence by him. Unless you force my hand." The room was silent. Charlotte's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she wasn't listening, her eyes fixed on me with a mixture of hatred and something new, respect. "What do you want?" she finally asked, echoing our phone conversation. "3 things," I replied. "First, you will sign a legal agreement relinquishing all claims to Dad's estate and company. Second, you will issue written retractions to everyone you've contacted with lies about me, Dad, or the inheritance. Third, you will never attempt to damage my reputation, career, or relationships again." "And if I refuse?" Her voice was barely audible. Mr. Goldstein stepped forward. "Then Miss Harper has authorized me to turn this evidence over to the appropriate authorities. The potential charges include wire fraud, embezzlement, attempted witness tampering, and defamation. Conservative estimates suggest a sentence of 8 to 12 years if convicted on all counts." Charlotte looked at Edward, perhaps seeking support, but his face was cold. "You told me it was all lies," he said quietly. "You swore to me your father was confused that Olivia was manipulating him." "Eddie, I don't." He stood up. "I can't be part of this anymore. My attorney will contact you about separation proceedings." As Edward walked out, something in Charlotte seemed to break. For the first time since we were children, I saw genuine emotion cross her face. Not calculation, not performance, but raw human feeling. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "It started so small, just a little extra money for things I deserved anyway. Then it became so easy to take more, to be the person Dad thought I was, instead of working for it." She looked up at me, tears streaking her perfect makeup. "I hated that you were so authentic, so genuine in your passions when I was just pretending to be the perfect daughter. I hated that you were free when I was trapped in Dad's expectations." "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion tightening my throat. "No, it doesn't." She took a deep breath. "I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't send me to prison, please." 2 hours later, Charlotte and her attorney had signed all the necessary documents. The agreement included a confidentiality clause. The evidence would remain private as long as she adhered to all conditions. As she prepared to leave, Charlotte paused at the door. "I don't expect you to believe me, but I am sorry, Liv. Not just for getting caught, but for who I became." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe in another life we could have been the sisters we pretended to be." I didn't respond. Some betrayals run too deep for simple forgiveness, and some relationships can never be repaired. As the door closed behind her, Mom took my hand. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I will be," I assured her, and for the first time in months I believed it. In the year that followed, I discovered talents I never knew I possessed. With the help of Dad's former colleagues, I learned to understand the business he had built. I didn't try to fill his shoes directly. Instead, I appointed an experienced CEO while maintaining majority ownership and a seat on the board. This arrangement allowed me to continue my photography career while learning about finance at my own pace. Charlotte kept her word, perhaps out of self-preservation more than remorse. The retraction emails were sent and the attacks stopped completely. Through mutual friends, I heard she and Edward had divorced. She had moved to Chicago to start over, away from the ruins of her former life. As for me, the inheritance that once felt like a burden became an opportunity to create positive change. I established a foundation in Dad's name that provides scholarships to art students from underprivileged backgrounds. I renovated his office building, creating a floor of affordable studios for emerging photographers and artists. Most importantly, I learned that standing in my own truth was more powerful than any manipulation or deception. Charlotte had spent her life constructing an elaborate facade that ultimately collapsed under its own weight. By contrast, the authenticity that she had ridiculed became my greatest strength. On the anniversary of Dad's death, I visited his grave alone, placing blue hydrangeas against the cold marble of his headstone. "I wish you had seen me clearly while you were still here," I whispered. "But I think you'd be proud of me now." As I walked away, I felt lighter, unburdened by the need for approval or validation that had shadowed so much of my life. Charlotte's betrayal had broken our family, but in that breaking, I had found my own strength and purpose. Sometimes the deepest wounds become the source of our greatest growth. A painful but necessary catalyst for transformation. As I wrap up this story of betrayal, justice, and personal growth, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment when family karma came full circle? Or maybe you've had to stand up for yourself against someone who always seemed to hold all the power. Your experiences matter, and this community supports each other. Through these difficult family dynamics, please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, or you found value in how I handled this family betrayal, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more authentic stories about navigating complex family relationships. And if you know someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, please share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most meaningful growth. Until next time.